I dated this man for almost 2.5 years, and he nearly killed me. He was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive, the whole package. The last time he assaulted me, it was because I told him I was moving out and getting a roommate. He didn't like that. He strangled me twice and punched me in the face. I'd escaped and called the cops, and he was arrested a few days later. Until then, though, he had been coaching me on how to lie to the police, how to say that I'd made it all up, that he didn't actually strangle me. At the time, I'd stopped taking my psychiatric medication and was having a psychotic break that night. So, at the first hearing, I recanted and repeated all the lies my ex had fed me. The judge believed me, and he was set to be released from jail, though he was still under some sort of state or county hold. Before his scheduled release, though, my head cleared, and I went back to the police and told them the truth. Another hearing was scheduled. My ex, a gang member, I won't say which one, was obviously notified about it. By now, I had moved into a new house with my roommate. Stupidly, I told him what street the house was on before he was arrested. My roommate's boyfriend at the time was also involved in that life. We sure knew how to pick them, right? Apparently, word got out that my ex's gang had marked my house. One morning around 6:00 a.m., my roommate and her boyfriend were sitting in her car in the driveway with the lights off. I was inside, asleep. A car pulled up and blocked them in. We're still not sure if they knew anyone was in the car. It sat there for a few minutes before the passenger got out and started walking up the driveway toward our porch. Luckily, my roommate's boyfriend had his gun on him. He got out of the car, flashed the gun, and the guy ran back to his car, which sped off. A few weeks later, I was at a nearby gas station after dark. As I was walking back to my car, a man in the same car from the driveway incident pulled up and started yelling. I couldn't understand him, so I yelled back, "Shut the hell up and leave me alone," assuming it was just random harassment. When I tried to leave, his car was blocking the exit, so I had to use a different one. As I turned onto my street, I saw him following me. I took different turns, but he kept on my tail. Finally, I panicked, sped up, and made a sharp turn that threw him off. I didn't go home that night. The next day, when I got back from work, I saw that the dining room window, the one facing the backyard, had been tampered with. The screen had been ripped off. We tried to do it ourselves, but it was really hard. My roommate's boyfriend finally managed it, but it took a lot of force. The last incident. My roommate's boyfriend and his friend went out for a walk. Coming back, they saw two men peering through the other dining room window, trying to look inside. My roommate's boyfriend started yelling at them, asking what they were doing, and they scurried off. My ex and I had our final hearing a few months ago. I got him locked up until 2036. I think his gang buddies have probably realized that a man locked up for the next 12 years isn't worth risking their own freedom for. I've been left alone ever since. Okay, everyone, this all happened yesterday, and I'm still very anxious about the whole situation. We were on the train to Paris, my boyfriend, our 4-month-old daughter, and me. There were 4 seats on each side of the aisle, and we were on one side. On the other side was a man in his 50s. From the very beginning, he was acting a bit weird, mumbling to himself and so on. I just ignored him because I was a bit exhausted from traveling. He smiled at my daughter and said something in French. Then I heard a noise, like someone taking a picture. I was surprised and thought it was the grandma sitting near the man, taking a picture of my daughter. I let it pass because I know grandmas go crazy for babies, and this might have been an innocent picture. But then my boyfriend, who was sitting in front of me, told me it was the man, and he was visibly uncomfortable. I started to feel uneasy too, because he was very creepy. Then my baby started crying. After trying to calm her down, I gave her to my boyfriend to try and figure out what she needed. That's when the man took another picture of our daughter. My boyfriend confronted him, asking if he was taking pictures. He said no, but it was clear he was. He said he was calling his sister, but it didn't look like he was calling anyone. It looked like he was taking a photo. He kept looking behind his phone in the direction of my daughter and checking the phone every few seconds before doing it again. Then he showed us a random chat to try and prove he wasn't doing anything. He said if my boyfriend had a problem, they could talk at the Paris train station. I asked myself why he didn't just show us his gallery with all the pictures. That seemed really strange to me. He then said he was just taking pictures of himself, taking selfies. Time passed, and he started doing it again. At that point, I left with my daughter and went to find a ticket collector to ask to change seats and tell them what was happening. They gave us some new seats, very far away from our old ones and away from the creepy old man. We described him, and they told us they'd handle it. Then we saw the man coming our way. He went to the bathroom near us, even though it was far from his seat. I got creeped out again. It was as if he was looking for us. The ticket collector went after him and asked him what he was doing there. I don't know what he said, but his gestures were weird. Then he went back to his seat. After a while, though, he came back and went near us. This happened like 5 times. I was terrified. He had a small purse with him too, and my imagination went crazy. The ticket collector went after him every time and asked him if he was looking for something. He warned him to stop. What was this guy doing? Why was he being such a creep? After we arrived at the station, we ran like crazy to catch another train as quickly as possible because we were really scared he was following us and we didn't want to deal with him on the next train. And night at the movies turns creepy. Hey everyone, this all happened yesterday, and I'm still very anxious about the whole situation. My best friend and I, both 18-year-old females, went to see the new Alien, Romulus movie. While the film was as thrilling and terrifying as we'd hoped, something else overshadowed our experience. A man sat directly behind us. We first noticed him as we approached the theater. He stood out immediately, dressed in an old-fashioned brown suit with a blue dress shirt. I'm not exactly a fashion expert, but his outfit was unusual, certainly not red carpet fancy, but fancy enough to make people dressed in baggy t-shirts and jean shorts look bad in comparison. As we got closer, he turned his head and stared at us, making no effort to hide it. He kept staring until we entered the building. It set off alarm bells in both of us. Inside, while my friend ordered a mini pizza at the concession stand, she noticed the man had come in, got behind us, and continued to stare. I was too distracted by movie posters to notice at the time, but she made direct eye contact with him. When we got our food, we headed to the ticket booth. The process was manual, and while we were figuring out which theater our movie was in, I noticed the man was behind us again, just watching. It struck me as odd, especially since he'd gotten his popcorn before we even got our pizza. But my friend didn't want to assume the worst. We eventually found our seats in a theater that wasn't very crowded. Only a few couples were sitting higher up. We chose seats near the railing, even though there were plenty of rows. The man chose to sit directly behind us. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe he didn't want to sit alone or wanted to feel young again by being near some young ladies. We had exaggerated reactions to jump scares, which we did. The man kept getting up and leaving the theater, sometimes for shorter periods, other times for longer. I could hear him grunting or sipping his drink, though I never heard him eat his popcorn at all, thankfully, because I really hate chewing noises. Occasionally, it felt like he was staring at us whenever he returned. Once, when I turned my head slightly, it seemed like he was. As the movie neared its end, my anxiety peaked. I couldn't handle it. My heart was already racing from the suspense on screen and the growing paranoia. I decided I wanted to leave, and it seemed my friend felt the same way, because she immediately got up when I did. We were the first people out of the entire theater to make a move to leave. My friend and I noticed that the very moment we stood up to leave, the man did too. As we made our way down the stairs opposite to the one he took, we noticed the man standing by a stairwell, just staring at us. He could have left before us, but he waited. When we passed him, he followed after us as we walked down the hallway leading to the exit. I tried to play it cool, making casual comments about the movie to avoid looking alarmed. My friend was too freaked out to respond, but I kept talking until we reached a corner where she suddenly bolted for the front doors. I followed, walking quickly, pretending to be on the phone and holding my car keys. Once outside, whispering in my car, both of us shaking with fear, we decided to go to a nearby store instead of heading home right away. As we pulled off into the road, I looked back and saw a truck moving around the area we were in the parking lot. My mind convinced itself that it was the same guy, but I had no proof to go off of. While we were at the store, we discussed what had happened, both of us admitting to feeling a bad gut feeling. My friend had muscle tension in her shoulders, while I felt nauseous and endured a painful stomach cramp. After some time, we returned to the theater parking lot. There were now more cars and people around. She dropped me off in my car, and we agreed to meet at a nearby Walmart just in case. As I pulled out of my parking space, I noticed a truck of a similar color to the one I'd seen earlier behind my car. My heart dropped, and I called my friend in a panic. The truck made a U-turn to get into the same lane as me, or so it seemed, but fortunately, there were enough cars at the stop sign to slow it down. We made several turns to lose the truck before arriving at Walmart. I want to clarify that we weren't sure if the truck was behind us or not. We just assumed the worst, and we did what we felt necessary in a scenario where we were followed. When we finished shopping, our anxiety had extinguished itself, and we both got home safely. Reflecting on it now, I feel a mix of embarrassment and sadness. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the man just liked those seats or was trying to be polite by letting us go first. Perhaps he had a bladder problem, which explained his frequent trips out of the theater, or maybe my paranoia made me imagine that the truck was his. I don't know, and I feel a bit ashamed for assuming the worst. My friend and I love movies, and to run out of our favorite theater felt humiliating, especially if the man meant no harm. Was I overreacting, or was I really right to trust my instincts? The whole situation feels weird and creepy, made worse by watching a horror movie. The movie was fantastic though, just maybe not the best idea to watch it when your mind is already on high alert. The night I fought back. This happened in 2014 to 2015. I'm a female, and I was about 20 years old. I'll give you some context before telling you what happened. I was studying in a lovely seaside city in France. Everyone cycled all the time, to school, to work, to parties, you name it. It was a very safe place, full of tourists and students. I lived and studied in this city between 2012 and 2015. Up until the events I'm going to mention, I never ever felt unsafe, and I didn't hear anything from my friends either. In December 2014, my boyfriend took me to his engineering school's Christmas party. There was a large group of friends, and we mingled a lot. One of the guys from the group, whom I didn't know personally, left the party without anyone noticing. Well, a month later, he was found dead in the harbor. The police never figured out what had happened. I went online to check if there was any news, and it's still a cold case. I didn't know him, but I think about it all the time. What happened? Was he alone? Did he fall, or did someone push him? Why didn't anyone care to walk home with him? Needless to say, the city started to feel a whole lot less safe. But at 20 years old, I didn't have the same understandings of such things as I do now as a 30-year-old. My life carried on. A couple of months passed, and it was the beginning of 2015. A friend was badly assaulted while cycling back home after a party. He was found in critical condition, his body lying halfway on the road and halfway on the sidewalk. His head had been smashed on the sidewalk step, and his jaw was completely shattered. He was a big guy in every sense possible, not the sort of guy you could push around easily. When he was recovering in the hospital, he couldn't make sense of what had happened. He had no idea why he was attacked on his bike. The police didn't find the suspects. 2 students, my age, in the same friend circles were brutally assaulted for no reason. I still cycled everywhere because I had no other choice. I lived 8 kilometers away from my school and didn't have any other means of transportation. This meant that I cycled approximately 16 to 20 kilometers every day, and I'd been doing it since 2012. We're in the spring of 2015, and I'm cycling back home from a party with my boyfriend. I've had a few drinks, but I'm not drunk. I'm just tired. My boyfriend is annoying me because he's not waiting for me, and the distance between us keeps getting bigger. Suddenly, someone jumps on me. He appears from nowhere and kicks my bike to the ground. I've been cycling so much that I'm used to the bike. I let it fall between my legs but don't fall myself. I resist and stand up. It's a man. I reach for my bike, which is now on the ground, with my left hand, trying to get a hold of the handlebars. He kicks me, then my hand. He kicks again and again, but I'm already holding the handlebars. It hurts, but I'm lifting the bike. He says something, but I don't hear it. I see my boyfriend looking at me. He's a bit far away, but he stops cycling. He's going to help me. The man will see that I'm not alone. I'm still standing and lifting my bike. It's been maybe 2 or 3 seconds since the man jumped on me. My boyfriend is looking at me, then he turns his back. My heart drops. He starts pedaling away. It's the dead of night, and there's no one else. I'm on my own. The man keeps kicking. He wants me to let go. My hand looks blue, but my grip is strong. I think about the other 2 students. They give me strength. I think about my boyfriend. The sight of him cycling away fills me with pure rage. I'll use this rage. The man is holding some kind of glass in his hand. I grab it with my free hand and then smash it into his face. I'm doing it. I'm furious. I'm getting the bike up. Surely the glass had alcohol in it because it burns his eyes. I have a split second to launch myself and start pedaling away. He can't reach my hand anymore, so he kicks my bike one more time. I stand strong on the pedals. He tries to chase me, but I'm faster. I pedal until I can no longer breathe. I pedal until I feel numb. That night, I knew I escaped something terrible. Due to the stress, I can't describe the man. I'll never know for sure if my experience was linked to the other attacks. However, we were all walking and cycling on the same route. 10 years later, and I can still remember the look on my ex-boyfriend's face when he turned his back on me. The creepy customer. Just for context, I'm a teenage female and still attending school, so I work the same night shifts on Fridays and midday weekend shifts every week. Around 5 months ago, I served a man who came in with his family during the weekend. He was really rude to me and my coworker, constantly demanding extra stuff, claiming the food wasn't fresh, and he was also very strict with his family. He yelled at his kids to stand in line and walk to wash their hands. He yelled at them if they talked while eating. When he was beginning to leave, he randomly came back to me, guiding his crying daughter to tell me thank you for the food. She was clearly upset and embarrassed, trying to hide her face. I didn't see him again until maybe 5 weeks ago. Every Friday when I work the night shift by myself, he comes in to buy food but eats in the store by himself. My other coworker leaves 2 hours before closing, and all I have to do is the last bit of orders, clean the store, close up, and then turn off the lights. Each time, he was being overly nice, but it felt so performative. Like he would smile, give me a compliment, and then his face would drop, waiting for my reaction. It creeped me out, but it wasn't any reason for concern until 2 weeks ago. He ate inside again, and left maybe an hour later. I closed up the store and cleaned. Finishing up at around 11:30 p.m., I left through the back car park and went to the strip of stores across the road because I wanted to go to the bank and then further down the street to the laundromat to wash my apron. No one had bothered to do it before. When I was going to the bank, I saw the man again, waiting outside the bank on his phone. I didn't think anything of it. I'd seen him before, and it made sense to me that he was there. I walked right past him, without acknowledging him, down the street, until I noticed him following me. Each time I stopped, so would he. If I randomly turned across the road, he was still there. He always kept a gap between us. I'd even tried doing random things to see if he'd do the same. When I finally reached the laundromat, he stood in front of the door, just watching me. Not really knowing what to do, since the laundromat is a long hallway, and I didn't want to be face to face with him when I came out of the entrance. I booked it for the fire escape on the opposite end, which led to an alleyway surrounded by the sides of apartments. It took me ages to walk out of the alleyway, until I finally reached the street where I could walk around the block of stores, back to the bank, and then diagonally to the car park. I looked down the street again, but I didn't see him. I told my coworkers and boss about it. I now no longer have the night shift and work Fridays after 4:00 p.m. My coworkers have been keeping a lookout, but I haven't seen him since. The night the nightmare became real. This all happened, but now that things are returning to the new normal, I figured it's a good time to share. This is what I thought was a nightmare. First, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, but it feels like a clear memory just because of how scary it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, maybe 6 at most, and my twin brother and I shared a bunk bed in a room at the furthest end of the house where we grew up. The nightmare had me in my bed, looking out the window to see a red sky, the kind you get in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and only other thing I remembered in this nightmare was that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appeared at the window and stared right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time. When I woke up screaming, the only thing I could remember from when I woke up was having my mom come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wondered where my dad was at the time. Fast forward to this May. My father is in the hospital in the country he lives in Colombia, and my twin brother and our older sister are staying in a hotel about a 5-minute walk away from the hospital. He's staying in the ICU. After a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings, and I returned to the hotel and sat together to have a couple of beers and just try to relax after all of that. We started discussing things, just trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams came up, and I brought up the above story. Well, without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that that had really happened, that some guy really did look through my window, and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, who's 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom that my brother and I shared. Her room faced our lawn and street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into too much detail about the days before this nightmare and event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she had ridden her bike home with some friends a couple of times before the day immediately before this nightmare. This time was no different, but the man actually drove right past the house at the time. She was a lonely kid. My brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown for a speech impediment that many twins have, and my mom had to pick us up, rather than be home for my sister after school. But she was never home alone for more than an hour. That afternoon and evening were pretty normal, as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store. And we all had dinner, did homework, played, and did the usual family things before bed. That night, around 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock a.m., this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house, trying to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up. She screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it was unlocked. My dad stormed in and tried to shove the guy out, or he tried to hit him with the nightstick he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly. This caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as he came back a moment later to try and get into the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked, because my mom didn't want my brother and I to open it, because our bed was right up against it. My sister said I screamed as loud as I could, and my mom went in to get my brother and me, while my dad tried to go after him by running out of the front door to chase him. But to no avail, as the guy hauled ass right through our backyard. The way our backyard was situated, it backed up right against a small rail yard that was part of the aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and that rail yard was a very good amount of very dense trees that always made the backyards very, very dark. So my dad didn't want to get attacked by him there, so instead, he went back inside to our house, called the police, then called our elderly neighbor to make sure they were okay, while our mom took care of us kids. This is all my sister could remember from that night. It was a very long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else after that. Either in the story just sort of stops right there. My father sadly passed away in the hospital, so we aren't able to ask him. Given all of that, none of us have really thought to ask our mom yet, but maybe I'll ask her soon. A handshake that could have changed everything. The story goes back to the 90s. I was 7 or 8, walking home from school, a 5-minute walk in a safe district. But there was something waiting for me on my way home that day. I remember a man, a smile, a big hand reaching to me to shake my small one. 2 men away, there was another man leaning on a car with its door open. I did shake his hand, and I remember him not wanting to let go. He had started asking questions about school and teachers. I was answering the questions while trying to liberate my hand. Then, out of nowhere, my best friend from elementary school that year showed up. She shouted my name and stood not too close, but not far away, watching us. Then, the man stopped smiling, let loose of my hand, and went to the car, looking frustrated. My friend looked scared and serious. I totally forgot all about those 2 minutes of my life because I didn't know what tragedy I had escaped. Then, somehow, the memories re-emerged after 20 years, and I understood that it was a kidnapping attempt. The wrong house, the right nightmare. Last night, I awoke to the unsettling noise of loud banging and my dog's frantic barking. Living alone with my girlfriend, we've grown accustomed to our neighbors' domestic disputes, and I have to call the police often. I stumble to the bathroom, as the walls there are thin and separate our duplex from theirs. As I approached the bathroom door, the entire house was dark, and a tall shadow was in my bathtub. I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I'm incredibly nearsighted, so I struggled to discern whether the shadow was merely the shower curtain or what it was. Then, the shadow spoke. I don't know what he said, but the gut-wrenching panic I felt is still fresh. I screamed and fled back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My girlfriend, now awake and terrified, joined me as I dialed the police. They instructed me to lock the door, but my bedroom doesn't have one. With the banging growing louder and more aggressive, I braced myself against the door, praying that help would arrive in time. To my relief, the police arrived swiftly, in only 5 minutes. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, I found they had dragged him, naked, from the bathtub because he had been trying to shower. They were questioning him on my couch while he was handcuffed. He was apparently incredibly drunk and had just wandered into the wrong house. This was the one night that we forgot to lock the doors. Gotta love it. My stalker. I'm sharing my story because there are people who have been through similar experiences. Maybe they're still healing. But I also need some advice. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14, I really liked older guys, not just guys who are 1 year older than me, but those who were 3 to 4 years older. That's how I met my ex. He was 17 at the time, and he seemed like a really sweet guy until he started talking about his mental health struggles and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his medication, and he threw tantrums all day, verbally abused me, and overall, didn't even care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day, he blocked me, basically ending our relationship. I never heard from him again until 2 months ago. One day, I came home from school and saw an envelope in the mailbox. It was unusual for us to get mail besides bills, but this wasn't a bill, it was a letter. I put it in my purse and went inside. Once in my room, I said hi to my mom, and then opened the envelope. There was no return address or anything like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature I might recognize. I started reading it, but it was hard because the handwriting was awful. The person who sent it was telling me how they regretted letting me go and that they wanted me back. I thought one of my friends was playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, laughing about the situation. Later that night, I was about to go to sleep when I saw an unknown number pop up on my screen. I was confused because I rarely get calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to answer, but I thought maybe it was one of my friends trying to prank me. I picked up, and I heard breathing. Hello, I said. No answer. Beatrice, are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me? Still no answer, just heavy breathing on the other end. Suddenly, I heard his voice. Who's this? My eyes widened, and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief, put my phone on silent mode, and went to sleep. I never thought for a second that this phone call would be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. The next morning, I woke up to several calls from that same unknown number. I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person telling me to pick up and just talk. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued, even after I got to school. While I was outside the school gates, smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered with an upset tone, "Dude, who the hell are you? Why are you calling me?" The person stayed silent for a few seconds, then said my friend's name. She heard her name and asked, "Who are you? Who are you talking to? You know who I am." "Of course I know. I can see you," he replied. I looked around but didn't see anyone besides my classmates. There were only 6 people around, and no one was on a call or anything. I got creeped out and hung up. I eventually recognized the voice. It was my ex. I told my friend that he had been calling and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and I didn't know what to do. She said I couldn't really do anything about it and that I should just ignore the calls. But as time went on, I started getting more letters, and sometimes even flowers, right next to the fence of my house. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but not what class I was in. Then, I started getting single roses on my desk every week when I got to school. My classmates told me they never saw who brought them because they were already there by the time they got to class. I was super paranoid. I started receiving pictures of my friends and I outside the school gates, sometimes even when I was alone. I would underscore my pants whenever I saw the unknown number pop up on my screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough. One day, I called the number he had saved in my phone. He never picked up, so I started texting him on the apps where he hadn't blocked me. I told him to stop, or I would contact his boss and complain about his creepy behavior. He even said I would make false complaints about his work performance to get him fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for about a week. But then, I started seeing him on the street, in public transport, and outside my school. Mind you, this guy lived in another country by the time we broke up, and he only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about when he came back, and they told me that he came back to our home country the same day I started getting the calls. After I learned he knew my school schedule, I could barely leave the house. I always asked a classmate who lived nearby to pick me up on their way to school. One day, I wasn't so lucky. My classmate who usually drove me was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus. When I got on, I saw his blonde wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry and didn't know how to get off the bus without him getting off at the same stop. In my country, we are supposed to talk to the driver while he's driving, but I had no other choice than to ask him not to let him off. I explained the situation, and he was thankfully very understanding and didn't let him off. My ex was banging on the glass doors, screaming to be let off at the stop, but the driver just kept the door shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I waited for another bus to come. It's been a month since school ended, and I haven't seen him since, but I'm really scared he might come back when school starts. The police won't do anything about it, and I even started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me whenever I go out, and I even changed my phone number, but I don't know what else I can do. I also want to mention that he has a twin brother. I knew this, but I never thought that maybe his brother was also involved. I'm actually starting to think they are in on this together, and that's why I see him so often. The wedding guest. I went to my friend Courtney's wedding a couple of days ago, and I still can't shake what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday. Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and she was definitely the only one who felt that way, judging from the stares from people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when a guy sat next to me. He said the seating chart indicated he was supposed to sit at my table, and then introduced himself as the groom's friend, Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they played Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later, I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired, and I thought I had just left it in my car, so I went into the parking lot and into my car to look for it. I found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought I had brought it inside, but at that point, it was pretty late, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more, and I noticed Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. Pretty soon, I felt pretty sick too, so I said goodbye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something strange. It looked like something had dug down from the trunk. I took out my keys and looked back there, and that's when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out, with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car, where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gotten home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said she feels terrible that she invited him, and that she had no idea he would do something like that. I haven't stepped out of my house since because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me like he was before. So, I want to give a little update. The last couple of days have been kind of crazy, so I haven't had the chance to look, but thank you all for your advice. I really wish I would have known about it earlier. Unfortunately, my address was on my ID, as I now learned. Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they know each other well enough for him to be invited to the wedding. After that whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it, but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and lurked around the parking lot before running off when he saw security. He left me a note on my windshield that just said, "I'm watching." Security and my job have been notified about him, so hopefully I'm safe there. I was told by other people who went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to get a restraining order against him, and I feel horrified. He lives in my city, and he knows where I live, so I'm staying at my aunt's house as we speak. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to provide an update. The hunting trip. A guy I used to work with really wanted to take me hunting. I work at a big retail store as a self-checkout host. Most of my days are spent walking laps and listening to customers saying things like, "I don't work here," or "Why aren't you on the register?" I understood their frustrations. Usually, there would be 2 or 3 of us at self-checkout, and maybe 2 manned registers open. Well, we got a new guy in, we'll call him Terry. Terry always wore a mask because it was 2021, and COVID was still going around. I was training him, telling him to stock candy in bags. He would ask questions anyone would ask if they're in school, like if I have a girlfriend. I lived in a small city/big town that had a good college, so students from all over the country would come and usually wound up working in retail or prisons. He usually asked me the same questions. I told him no on both accounts. He then asked me if I ever went hunting. We had a lot of woods and a big forest around town. I replied, "No, I don't like guns." He then said that he'd have to take me one day. A few days go by, and he's over on my side again. He asks if I have my family in town, and if not, do they live close? I live 3 doors down from my mom. He starts talking about hunting again. How he was out with his buddies and started using pack tactics where they would box in the prey and then finish it off. Weird for deer, seeing as they flee at the first thought of a noise. He was off for a few days because new hires have problems getting hours for the first 3 weeks. I talked to one of my coworkers, and they told me that he asks a lot about me. The next time I saw him, his questions were very telling. How tall would you say you are? How much do you weigh? How well do you know the woods past so-and-so street? I'm a big guy at 6'4", and 300 ulls, and when he brought up hunting again, a creepy thought would send chills down my spine. Come on, man, you'd like it. Just some good old boy shooting the __ late at night in the middle of the woods. Then the real fun starts right before dawn. They won't know what hit them. The mask hid most of his face, but I could see a gleam when he smiled. I don't know why he thought that would be a great way to convince someone, other than making them feel like he was about to hump them. It sounded like I would have been bored as hell. I must have made a face or something because then he turned and walked away quickly. I told a couple of coworkers about it, but that was his last day. I never saw him again, and I hope I never. The guardian dog. There's this street dog near my college campus that I see every day. He's one of the older dogs, so he's always sleeping and very calm in general. I live very near to the college, and my friend and I usually go for a walk late at night after dinner. Tonight was no different, and we were walking around the same route. It's a residential area, so we've never felt unsafe because there are always college students or other families out on the road walking around. We were on our 3rd lap, and this dog was sitting at its usual spot. As we were walking past it, I was gushing about how cute it is and was clearly distracted. Suddenly, my friend said there was a weird car behind us. I turned around to see there was, in fact, a car driving at a really slow speed. The car pivoted towards us, which made me think that maybe it wanted to park where we were walking, and it might just be a random family. As I was about to convey these assumptions to my friend, we heard a dog barking and turned around to see it chasing after the car. Both my friend and I are scared of dogs, so she stood behind me hoping I would save her. But when I turned around, it was the same street dog from before. I knew right away it wouldn't harm us. The car suddenly sped past us, and the dog didn't chase us or anything. Instead, it just stood on guard. When we recovered from the shock of it all, we both had the same realization that the dog might have just saved us. We still don't know if that car had any evil intentions, but the way it sped up right when the dog started barking, the timing of it all was just way too bizarre. Plus, it was driving so slow that neither of us even realized until it was way too close to us. Needless to say, that dog will be getting extra pets from me every time I see it. The late night gym encounter. I go to the gym rather late. I'm a parent and a college student, so late night gym sessions work out well for me. I once got out of the gym around 12 o'clock a.m., stopped at a gas station to put some air into my tires, and I noticed a man kind of eyeing me from afar. Then he came up to me, offering to finish for me. I declined. He then went on saying that I have a good figure, and that I was really pretty. I thanked him and tried to go about my business. He kept talking and mentioned how I remind him of his girlfriend, who died a couple of years ago, and how he's in Arizona trying to get his __ together. There was a red car parked next to me, and it was full of stuff in the back, like someone lived in it. He said it was his, and he was renting a little room for his business, but the landlord found out he was living in it and not doing business, so he got kicked out. He said it was full of books, and that he loved reading, and I don't know what else he said. He said he doesn't have anywhere to go, and he can't go anywhere because he doesn't have plates on his car. He asked if I would follow him back to the office so the police would avoid reading his plates, since around this time, there's a bunch of them. I already knew this was a major red flag, but I was raised as a people pleaser, and I couldn't say no. After I said yes, I just knew I had made a mistake. I tried to turn back. He said it's fine, that it's just down the street, and that it'll be quick. I followed him, and we get to the office. It's in a dark alley, no one was around, and there were no streetlights. He tried to talk when he got out of his car, and I kept my windows rolled up with a small crack, just enough for him and I to hear each other, but not so much that he could reach inside. I kept my doors locked. He then asked if I wanted to come inside and see his books that he bragged about so much and how they helped him cope with his girlfriend's death. He opened the door to his office and tried to convince me that there wasn't anyone there, that it's safe, but all I saw was one exit to a small ass room, and he was standing right in front of it. I did see the books, but it wasn't enough to convince me. He said that he would bring them outside, but they're too heavy. I declined and said no, that I won't be going in there with him, but he kept trying to talk me into it, saying he's not going to do anything to me, he just wants to show me his books in his office. I declined again and said I would be leaving. He then stopped, was quiet for a bit, then said, "You know what? You're smart." After that, I sped off, and I never saw him again. I'm now at a phase in my life where I say no to anyone, and I'm always armed. I realized that I did put myself in that situation, and I also thank myself for being smart enough to get the hell out of it. I just wanted to share and spread awareness. Walmart watch. I was at Walmart today with my wife and our newborn. As we were nearing the exit, I noticed a younger woman in her 30s waiting and making eye contact with me. She was with an older man who looked to be in his 50s. She was giving off heavy meth vibes, and he was just disheveled. For whatever reason, they didn't pass the vibe, so I had my eyes on a swivel. As we walked back to our car, they followed us, but a few paces behind, still too far to approach. I put the baby and groceries in the car, closed everything, and the man ended up fumbling with his keys, as if to try and find his car. I was sufficiently on my nerves at this point, so I looped around with the car to see where they parked. It turned out they were 4 lanes over. They then got into a car that was already running but parked without license plates. Vermont plates, and we're in North Carolina, which makes the key fumbling by the gentleman really out of character. Am I just being paranoid, or is this some sort of thing that happens? Maybe it's just new parent creeps. I'd really like to know everyone's thoughts. Also, I did have our groceries on the bottom of the stroller. Maybe they wanted to steal those. This was also at 2:00 p.m. at a busy Walmart in the Triangle area. I don't know. All I know is they really gave me the creeps. The Burger King encounter. I stopped at Burger King on my way to work early one morning. Around 6:00 a.m., I parked in front, got out of the car, and started to walk inside. I always try to be aware of my surroundings, but I didn't notice anyone else around. Within seconds of entering the restaurant, a man in sunglasses walked in right behind me. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I ordered coffee and hash browns and stood by the counter waiting for my order. Suddenly, the man approached me. "Hey, is that your car out there?" he asked, gesturing toward the parking lot. "Yeah," I replied, a little wary. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "To the university," I answered, although my first instinct was to lie. I was actually going to my job, which was located off campus. But I was already uneasy and didn't want to tell them where I worked. "Well, do you think you could give me a ride to Waters Drive?" he asked. I was surprised. The street he mentioned was on the way to the university. How convenient. I took a closer look at him. He still had his sunglasses on, as if he'd forgotten to take them off. I thought it was strange that he was wearing sunglasses at all on such a cloudy morning. The sun was barely even out. He was a typical-looking white guy, maybe in his 40s or 50s. He was well-dressed, wearing a button-up shirt, a tan leather jacket, and nice dress shoes. He didn't look like he was struggling financially, or at least not so badly that he couldn't afford an Uber. It was only about a 20 to 30-minute walk. But being a young woman, I wasn't going to take a chance on letting a stranger into my car, so I politely declined. "Sorry, I can't," I said. He nodded, shuffled around for a few seconds, and left the restaurant without ordering anything. I found the encounter unsettling, but I tried to dismiss it and continued with my day. Later, when I was leaving work and heading to the university, I couldn't stop thinking about the man. He knew I was a student, and he knew exactly what kind of car I drove. A bright blue PT Cruiser that stood out. I started to feel paranoid. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, but my coworker agreed that the situation was strange. She suggested I report it to the police, just in case. Even though it seemed like a simple request for a ride, there were a few details that made me uncomfortable. I called the non-emergency line and told them about the encounter. I said it had happened hours ago, and it was probably nothing, but I wanted to report it just in case. I was sure they would tell me I was overreacting, but when I described the man in sunglasses, the dispatcher's voice became urgent. She scolded me for not reporting it sooner. She said she was going to dispatch a police car to the Burger King, but it was probably too late. She told me to call immediately if I saw him again. The dispatcher's reaction shook me more than the encounter itself. To this day, years later, I still remember it vividly. I wonder if my description matched someone they were looking for. I regret not calling earlier, but I was so convinced they dismissed me as being paranoid. I never saw the man again, but I still think about it sometimes. The corn shirt stalker. I recently started working at Walmart in the online grocery department. While I don't interact with customers as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and guide people to items they can't find. There are plenty of clueless people who don't even bother to look before asking me where something is, and some people are just plain rude. However, aside from this one encounter, I haven't had a problem with creepy men at my past jobs. I'm used to getting weird comments about my body and body modifications. But I guess at Walmart, there's always someone a bit more eccentric walking around, so I don't get as many. It all started around noon when I went on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle, struggling to fit a box pack of non-alcoholic beverages into my cart, when this guy came up and helped me. He was probably in his early to mid-20s. This adds to the creep factor, because I had only recently turned 18 and hadn't switched out my yellow name tag yet. He was a bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, and he was wearing a Korn shirt. I thanked him for helping me, and I said I liked his shirt. He said it was no problem, and then complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I picked up my handheld scanner and got back to bagging soda, hoping I wouldn't get sent on exceptions that night. About 15 minutes later, I was in the soup aisle, crouched on the floor, bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment. Someone walked up behind me and said, "Hey, could you help me?" I was surprised. Nobody, and I mean nobody, ever asks for help so directly when they want my attention. I stood up and turned around to see the same guy. He said he'd been looking everywhere for baking soda and that he probably passed it, but wanted to make sure he was looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few aisles over, and what a coincidence. The next thing I needed for my pick run was bread flour. I told him I was heading over to the baking aisle right now, and I'd show him where it was. He said, "Thank you." I finished scanning the Dinty Moore and we headed over. It was a Tuesday, and the store was completely dead. I was seeing my coworkers more often than customers. We got to the baking aisle, and I showed him the baking soda before picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to choose from, so I was there for a good 10 minutes, picking different items. I couldn't help but notice that he had put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart and was just standing there on his phone, occasionally looking at me. A little strange, but maybe he was texting someone and feeling a bit awkward that neither of us had left the aisle. Who knows? I finished my pick run, staged the totes into the cart, and brought it to the back. I went on 2 more runs before my 15-minute break, and I caught a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figured he was just having a hard time finding stuff because the Walmart I work at is massive. I continued on with my day, went into the break room to eat the salad I had in the fridge, and drank a cherry Pepsi while getting the good gossip from one of the guys from customer service. Life was good for a second. I thought I saw Corn Guy walk past the door, but I figured it was just an employee wearing the same shirt and didn't think of it again until later. My manager told me to do 3 more pick runs before I went to the back to start dispensing orders, so I headed out on a produce run. The produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy, so it's easily one of the most challenging pick runs. I got to the produce section and started doing my thing when I saw Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I laughed to myself for a second before realizing that it was 1:30 a.m. at this point, and this guy had been at Walmart for at least an hour and a half. There were only 3 things in his cart. I tried not to look in his direction, so he wouldn't try to talk to me, and I got back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point, I was getting some serious uncomfortable vibes. He walked up to me and said, "Hi." I said hi back and asked him if he needed anything. He proceeded to deliver the most unsettling message I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time, holding a bag of apples. He said, "I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight if you're trying to impress that guy you were talking to. You should just go for someone who'll love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You're so beautiful." I stared at this man in shock. 1. I eat salads for lunch because I freaking like them. It's not even a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits. Second of all, I have a boyfriend, Gavin from customer service, and he's also pretty big and couldn't care less what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that this random guy thinks that I, a grown-ass woman, have been working my whole life to be validated by him, a man who spends all day at Walmart without even getting paid for it. Needless to say, I was horrified and embarrassed because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who were giving us odd looks and were bothered by this guy's audacity. I couldn't tell him any of this though. I stuck with telling him, I think that's inappropriate for you to say, and you need to stay out of employee-only areas, like the break room. If you need anything else, you can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looked shocked as if this wasn't the nicest way I could have ended the conversation. I ended my pick run early to go talk to a manager in the back. I told her about Corn Guy, how he'd been following me, and how I wasn't going back out to pick tonight unless we knew for sure that he was gone. She was understanding, and she let me start dispensing early and set one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day went okay, except when my coworker and I went out together to take a huge order to one of the spots in the main parking lot. Corn Guy was sitting on a bench out front. I hoped he was just waiting for someone to pick him up and refused to take out any more orders to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him and with minimal trouble. At 8 o'clock, I went back to OGP, turning in my handheld scanner and keycard and saying goodbye to everyone left. I always park in the main lot now, right in front of the grocery section. As I was walking to my car, it was starting to get dark. It had been raining on and off all day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I unlocked my older car, I saw Corn Guy approaching me. I was really scared about what he wanted from me, but at this point, I had my keys out and the pepper spray on my keychain was clearly visible. I hoped he wasn't bold enough to try anything. He walked up to me and started trying to talk. I shut him down, telling him that he'd been following me all day and that I was really uncomfortable talking to him. Reminder: he'd been at Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point. I also told him that I was off the clock, and if he needed something regarding Walmart, he could go talk to customer service. If he wanted to talk to me personally, I wasn't interested and he needed to leave me alone. He had the nerve to actually look offended, and he said something that topped the salad rant in terms of strange things to say to a random woman. Okay, well, since you're going to be like that, I won't ask you out. You're really not very nice. I thought you were cool, and that maybe you could understand me, but you're just like every other girl. I was too curious, so I asked him what he meant. I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big, or who can appreciate Corn's artistry. I thought that maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other girl in this town. At the end of this little rant, he dug into the pocket of his sweatpants and produced the most underwhelming little switchblade I've ever seen in my life. This pitiful little thing couldn't even skin a hamster. I was somehow even more offended. First, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep-cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third, we do live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. Fourth, he was not only threatening me with a knife because I didn't live up to his ideal girl fantasy, but he thought I was going to be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I was so annoyed that I got into my car, told him to leave me alone, slammed the door, and got the hell out of there. I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so I guess it's only a matter of time.